It's a long, long way from the hills of Carolina to the arms of my darling in Jackson, Tennessee.
Hi guys! So the little bluegrass introduction there, Jackson, Tennessee. I am your instruction librarian here at Jackson State. My information is here on the library's main page, which you can locate. You're here, come over here to about the library staff. My email is rslagle@jscc.edu. My last name, you spell it S-L-A-G-L-E. I'm pretty much, very few of us. Yeah, you can click on me. This is my office phone number. Feel free to call that. Or you can call my Google number, which I have connected to my cell phone. Then here's the phone number, 731-227-2790. You can feel free to text me if you have questions about finding resources, what type of resources you need, primary sources. You're setting up your paper and you just have a quick question. I can answer your question. If you have beyond questions than that, you need to go to the Writing Center. The Writing Center will be open this summer, so you can take your papers there. The video that is following up this is kind of the introduction. I'll be talking about footnotes, and I tried to give you guys a lot of good examples. I wrote a 25-page research paper when I was in college, and that's the paper I use as example. There will be a follow-up of like written out instructions on how to do footnotes in Word. If you guys have more questions, again, feel free to talk to me. I am showing up in some of you all's classes this summer, so I will post in the discussion forums and in the fall too. I have made other videos on footnotes. We're in footnotes and bibliographies and title pages and just setting up Word as your default. Oh yeah, another thing is you can also come and book a librarian with me anytime. So book a librarian. You can say what time of day you want to do it. Say you want to do it tomorrow. You come and put your information. If you really want to talk to me specifically, then just put like, I would like to see Ruth. I need to make an appointment with Ruth. Anything along those lines. You know, you have questions about Chicago, finding primary sources, whatever. A little background for me. I was a history major in college. So I have a lot of, and I've studied history beyond that. I worked in a living history museum, like history a lot. And I studied a lot as just a pastime. So, and you also, if you need someone to talk, you know you have to write a paper, you're not really sure what you want to do it on, feel free to write me and send me a note, an email, send me a text, call me, or you can just, if, you can stop by, whoops. Also, and we can just talk about the possibilities. I will be looking at your forums, and we can talk on there. I'm here to help you guys flesh out your ideas and help you find the resources you're looking for that you need to write a great paper. Anyways, I will lead into talking about footnotes. We're in footnotes. So footnotes are at the end of each page like this. Endnotes are like this. These are endnotes. They are at the end of article or the paper. There are numbers next to them, or they're called notes, because here is your information on 119. Here's information on 119. Okay, now some of you have been asking about like notes inside of your footnotes or endnotes. You do not need to do that because this author, usually people who are using notes inside of their endnotes or their footnotes is that first they cite their source or they're adding extra information about that specific topic. And you don't, the level of paper y'all are writing, you don't need to be doing that. We know you're not experts in the field. We know you're just trying to learn about this. You haven't gone and done extensive research on it, so you may not have notes about it. So that is why you're not doing notes. Another thing you do is in notes, they list out specific, like they give you other resources. So he's giving us lots. So like in this, he's giving us lots of resources, which is why if you're doing research on something, so if you're doing research on World War II, you were talking about Doris Miller, you would come to the notes or the endnotes of the article and look at and see what sources he used as an author, and then go see if you can find those sources and go back to the original source as much as possible. So to recap, you are not using notes, so meaning you do not write a whole paragraph about segregation and not put that in your paper. You are putting that in your paper, not in your endnote. Your endnotes are only putting your sources, like where you got that information. Sorry. For example, I mean, I wrote a 25-page research paper. You guys are not writing 25 pages. I did not put any notes at the end of anything I was including. I just cited my information, like cited my source. Okay. So you're going to use Purdue OWL. This is the most comprehensive place online that has anything about the Chicago Manual, besides buying the manual itself. Bam, here's the manual. You can purchase the manual online. You can get a year's worth subscription from Chicago. You clicked on here, the manual. They don't give you the entire manual online, and OWL doesn't either. They give you pretty much all of it, but not quite all of it. So you can definitely come in and purchase access to it if you like. So it's $39 per year if you wanted to buy access to it for a year, which is only like $10 less than buying the actual manual itself. I paid like $45. No, it's less than 50, but it's more than 30. Also, you can use Citation Machine, but it is inaccurate. I have used it and it has been inaccurate. So I would really recommend don't use it. Just rely on the manual itself. If you have questions, you can email me, or you can take in your questions to the Writing Center and ask them for help. And like go ahead and ask them, tell them like, hey, I want to double check my citations are correct. And that can be your whole, you can do that as an appointment because they have a manual. I just found out, anyways. So yeah. Most of the stuff is on here. There are a few things that aren't, and I'm making a LibGuide for you guys, and I'm just going to do the examples that are like the ones I didn't find on here. I found were really confusing and are hard to find. Now, if there are others that you are having trouble with, having trouble finding, then email me and I can like give you an example of how to cite it correctly. I understand if you don't want to buy the manual, especially if you're not going to become like a historian or you write in Chicago often. That is totally understandable. So today I'm going to talk about books, journals, new web pages, like newspapers, and like we'll do physical books and ebooks as well because they're slightly different. And they break it out into like web sources and the different types of web sources have problems. Also, your distinguished professor has information on it for if you're in Professor Prater's class. So she links directly to OWL. She also links the Chicago Manual. She has and some guides to post and ask a librarian if you have questions. But yeah. And also, guys, submit your papers early. Get those into the Writing Center. Yeah. Okay. So this is a document I found on our webpage that is doing Chicago and Turabian. Chicago and Turabian are very, very similar, but they're actually not exactly the same, but they're very similar. They're actually even more similar now that the 17th edition of Chicago came out and the 9th edition of Turabian. So now there's like very little similarities. They're getting to be the same thing. And actually, Turabian came out to simplify Chicago back in the 60s. I don't think it didn't simplify Chicago back in the 60s. It made it more complicated. But that's just me. Anyways, bottom line, it doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong. You still have to cite in it. You can use this because not everything on the... Let me show you where you can get this, actually. How you can access that. Come to our live page, research, and then here is the documentation style stuff. Here's additional research stuff you can use. I don't know how to anyways, here's how you access the Writing Center. In case you didn't know, you search for it first. Okay, so they're saying it's academic programs, so then there's a Writing Center. You can come and make an appointment. Paper. When you're submitting your paper, I don't know if they have this option, but I would definitely tell them you're writing in Chicago, not any other style. Okay. So as you can see, this is my introduction paragraph. Now, because I was writing an extensive, like a more in-depth research paper that was a lot longer than yours, and this was just a criteria my professor had, I introduced my paper using a paraphrase. So this was all paraphrased. It wasn't all paraphrased, but I had me writing and then also was paraphrased. And as soon as my paraphrase ended, I had a footnote. Sorry. And so then my footnote was right here on the same page. So the first time you cite a person, a book, or resource, you list it all out. And you do their first name first, then their last name, the title of the work, where it was published, the publisher, what year it was published, and the page number. And this all depends on what the source is, whether it's a book or an article. I used a lot of books in this paper, not articles. As you can see, this has changed. Back in the day, we had to underline and put in quotation marks. I'm not really sure. I might have decided this wrong, but not completely. Anyways, a lot of things. I actually did this in 15th edition, has changed. I hope they don't keep changing it and stop changing it. So then I wrote a few more things and talked about what I was going to talk about in my paper. And then this sentence, overall, the level of difficulty for women reassimilating into white society depended on the age of the woman at the time that the Indians took her captive. That is my thesis. And then I break out my paper into 3 sections. I also had to have a historiography. A historiography is a section about the history of, it's like looking at whatever time period you're looking at, the history of it, how it's developed. And so I looked at the history of the American West and the frontier and what we see as the frontier. And so I had to look at what different historians have written about the frontier and about the West. So I had to compare and contrast a few historians of the West. Here I paraphrased, quote. So paraphrasing you can also do, and that's introduction to a quote. You don't always have to say, and according to Alan Binkley, we can easily conjure up the bittersweet memories of women. But what you're doing is you're introducing it through your previous paraphrase of, so you actually are talking about it and then you're talking about it. And then it's also really important to have transition paragraphs when you're writing your research. So this, I'm talking more about, I'm kind of transitioning. And yeah, so I'm summing up what I just talked about, and then I'm transitioning, and then this next one I'm transitioning into my first point, which was about children. And then I kind of have a mini introduction into children. Or I tell you who I'm going to talk about in my children's section, what women I'm going to talk about in my children's section. And so historians, by saying historians, I'm actually saying me. That's me. That's me talking in the third person. And then you can also, here I have, you can quote inside of and I know I've been working with one student and I didn't explain this very well, and it's just kind of hard to explain it when you're teaching you how to write a history paper. But you can have quotes inside of your sentence. So I have here, in the Miami tradition, little Frances endeavored to secrete herself under the stairwell leading to the loft in her house. So this is actually, since Frances Slocum went and lived with the Delaware Indians after they took her, in tradition that they have that's been orally passed down, that's what they say happened before the Indians came and took her from. And again, this is all, I read, how many knows how many pages this is, but this was all paraphrasing it. Now, if this had been to the end of this, if it had been more than 4 lines, which this actually is technically very close to being more than 4 lines. Also, what I do is, here I kind of do, the ... We're going to ignore that. So, I connected a bunch of little sentences together and just did ... Okay. Now, some of you might have some questions about if you are using a quote with, so someone's primary source inside of a book that you're using, you quote the book. So, there is this one in Revolutionary Mothers that is talking from a Scottish American women. woman named Cameron, and she prepared to leave her home in the Mohawk Valley. And then it has stuff about her writing. So that would be like a quote inside of a quote, which is what we're going to do. So let us do this. Just going to pause and then I'll write the quote out and then show you guys. Okay, so we have this quote we're using. So here we're putting our quotation marks in. So as y'all can see, where did the quote go? Okay. So she, blah, blah, blah. She told her friends, she put the quote, and we started our quote. And now we're going to put our endnote in. So we're going to insert our footnote. Now you need to have a space between each footnote. Just one space. Okay. So since this author we already quoted once, we can do one of two things. Depends on how confused you want your reader. So this is on page 105. Okay, so we can do I bid 105, which means it is the one before. Or you can just do, or you can do Perkin, which is the author's last name, comma, 105, period. That's all you have to do. Actually, that's not true. And then you have to do an abbreviated title. So you do revolutionary, you put this in italics. So say, let's do one on the Pirate Americans. What I'm gonna write two quotes and then I'll come back. I'm gonna type them up and then after I come back, I'm gonna, okay. So we're gonna come and insert our footnote for here. And this is coming from our pirate, patriots. So Patton, or Robert H. Patton, italicize. And I'm doing this with my keypad. I'm using Control, you can do Control I and then italicize. If you have a computer, you use, or a Mac, you use Command I. And those are just shortcuts on the keyboard. So Patriot, Pirates, the Privateer, War for Freedom, and Fortune. And then you unitalicize, parentheses, you do the where it was published. It is actually the same publisher as the previous one, and it was published in 2008. So New York, 2008, comma, and this was on page 172. And then we have Birkin. So insert. Okay. So we can't do iPad here because this quote is in between it. If you did iPad, then we would think that it was for the privateer books, not for the Revolutionary Mothers. So we need to come in and copy Perkin. There we go. But we need to change the page number. And the page number now is 122. And there you go. It could happen that you will have lots of, you don't want to have, I'm just showing you quotes. I'm not actually showing you papers, like writing. Anyways. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, so we're going to do an article now about a different topic, not the American. Well, actually, I guess we can keep with the American Revolution. So let's find an article. Right, so I'm in JSTOR, so I searched Patriot Pirates. So there's actually a book review for it. So we're going to choose this one, The King's Pirates. It's actually a little bit, well, actually, no, it's 17.6. So there is an abstract for it. Download our article. So as you can see, she's actually using footnotes at the end of each page. So sometimes your footnotes can be quite extensive and they take up most of your, like half your. Okay, so we're going to do this quote. Okay, so this is actually too long. It is more than, you can do block quotes. Block quotes are actually highly discouraged. So if you have a really good quote you want to use, but you don't want to do block, that's where you come into paraphrase. And you paraphrase it, and maybe you insert parts of your quote into your paraphrasing, but you still cite it. Sorry, they're bothering me. Okay, so this is a good example of teaching you guys how to paraphrase, which it's hard to do. Okay, so you put that in quotes. So why okay, so say we want to keep this quote. So we're going to take that out and we're going to keep that. And so that's our quote we're for sure going to use. And we want to keep this question. So why don't we do the stamp, we can say the axe, well, okay, so 3 acts created dissension following specifically the Townsend Act. Okay, so why did the British Navy become a source of resentment among radical American colonists after the 7 Years' War? 3 legislation acts created dissension between the colonists and the Crown following 1763. Well, actually, then you're not so close to what it was saying. Specifically, the Stamp Act of 1765, the Townsend's Act, an intolerable act designed to bring the American colonies into a more obedient, financially extractive relationship with Metro. Okay, so because you are paraphrasing it and you still are quoting, so even if it is very similar to what it was, you still have paraphrased and you're using quotes. Insert our footnote so that. Okay, so all the information you need for your footnote is right here. So we're gonna so this is page 4. Okay, so we're gonna come to our electronic journal. Okay, I think okay, so we put our title of the article in in italics. 71 is our volume number, comma. Probably you'll notice the biggest difference between Chicago and Turabian is Chicago addresses online sources, Turabian doesn't. That's the big, huge difference. And there's like commas and periods different places. Because like in this is all online sources. That's not all the online sources that exist. Okay, so we don't put the month it was published because we know we're giving it the volume and the issue, so then you'll still be able to find it. So you just give it the date. So you're actually doing ... and then the page it was taken from, which was page 4. And when we accessed it, which is today, comma, and then we put the dual I. So here is the citation, but this is not for your bibliography. Like this is for going into so that is. So as we're nearing an end, if we blah blah blah, and then we wanted to do another footnote, it looks like we could actually, and we could do blah blah blah. We'll just do blah blah blah. Okay, so it would make room for our footnote. You could probably fit a lot on here on a page. I'm back. Just wanted to show you guys that. Okay, primary sources. So this will be like an ebook, definitely. Or so we can actually go back to my bibliography and I will show you guys. So I used primary sources that were located online and they were ebooks. So you would cite them this way, or you would do your bibliography this way. So like this book was originally published in 1891 and I used Internet Archive and told you where I got it. It's much the same. We're in periodicals. Okay, so newspapers. So here is for an electronic book. Again, you're always listing out the author first, like their full name, and then you're transitioning stuff. And you want to be making sure you're giving where you got the ebook. Okay, so rule of thumb with web pages is you give as much information as you can find. Now, you want the author of the page that, like that specific author. So like, okay, so this is the author of this specific. This is when it was published, and so like if it was ever modified, you would take like when it was modified. If you can use news stuff, but you guys need to first find primary sources and find scholarly sources. Like go to scholarly sources first versus going to like blogs. You should not be using blogs. Like you can